Alex, are reporting, according to 4 people who are familiar with White House deliberations, is that President Trump is essentially growing weary of defending Attorney General Pam Bondi. This is someone that he said has been doing a fantastic job amid this uproar from, of course, his MAGA base. Many of them even pushing for him to fire Attorney General Pam Bondi, and he was sticking by her and has been sticking by her. But our sources say that he really wants her now to clean up this mess, and of course that mess is related to the DOJ and the FBI releasing this unsigned memo that said that there was no real information that Epstein had a client list that the government had to release. That, of course, angered so many people in the president's base who are pushing for a release of that client list, even though, again, the government is saying one doesn't exist. That being said, the president had been pushing his supporters to sort of leave this behind, but then reverse course and push Bondi and the DOJ to actually go after the grand jury transcripts and make them public. So they're doing that now and waiting for a judge to make that decision. But I want to read to you part of what the president put in the original post about this. Originally, he was asking for all pertinent information to be released. Then afterwards, he said, in fact, that he wanted all information related to grand jury testimony to be released related to the Epstein case. So it's a slight deviation, but it's an interesting one because before he's saying all pertinent, now he's saying all. What you're seeing here is the president responding to this really unprecedented pressure from his base. He's been able to weather so many scandals and issues, but for this one, his own supporters are saying that he needs to release more information. And they're essentially claiming that he and his administration are essentially having a cover-up related to Epstein. So this is something that the president is trying his best to push back on. Of course, we also have that lawsuit against the Wall Street Journal, and they're reporting that he wrote a birthday letter to Jeffrey Epstein back in 2003. So there's a lot going on, and the president is trying his best to get a handle of this situation, Alex.
Okay, Yamiche, thank you so much from the White House. Joining me now here in studio, we have Jake LaHut, a senior writer for Wired, who covers the Trump White House and the Republican Party. And he writes, Trump's own strategists and advisors aren't sure the president's base will survive Jeffrey Epstein's ghost. Welcome, Jake. What do you mean by the base not surviving?
Well, I think that if you look at the polling, and I'm quite curious to see what might come out around the Sunday shows tomorrow, Trump's overall approval rating may not take too much of a hit, and he's always been able to survive in that, kind of high 30s, low 40s range. But I think there is a distinct before and after here with the base in terms of trust and just how they view their relationship with the president in that kind of unique parasocial way that he's been able to command them. And the bigger thing is that this is a voter and volunteer enthusiasm issue for the Republican Party more broadly going into the midterms. Yeah. When you look like who are the folks who donate small amounts of money, who are willing to knock on doors and volunteer. So that's where you could start to see some knock-on effects from this. And the Trump advisors who I spoke to, they're just simply perplexed and a little aghast at the lack of a strategy here. And that's where you start to see a lot of the blame going towards Pam Bondi.
Is there anything that could be released that would quell the questions and satisfy the MAGA base?
No, I don't think so. And I did have an advisor in that piece quite literally say there's nothing we can do to satisfy the base. The problem also is kind of in the nature of the conservative media ecosystem and how it's evolved over the last 5 years. So there's always a desire to just churn out more and more content from a big data dump like this. If we think of something like the Twitter files, which if you or I can recall any unique bit of information from that, probably not. But the conservative, influencers who feasted on that thing, they were able to extend that out for weeks and weeks. And I think that that's fundamentally the same desire here. But once it's in their hands, it's out of control of the White House. And of course, you think of identifying information for victims and all those considerations.
But look, Trump's been able to survive any number of malaise, controversies, issues that come up. What makes this different?
Well, a couple things. I think, first of all, his image with the base has always been this guy who's from the cadre of the elite, who is willing and more brave than everyone else to go in there and expose all of them, right? And a recurring theme with a lot of the things that really gin up the base center around these kind of elite pedophiles. So suddenly, when he starts getting a little dodgy and non-committal around Epstein, coupled with the fact that he decided to stack the top levels of federal law enforcement with Epstein truthers, you end up in this kind of impossible position. And the sort of
his own making.
Right. And the cope that I was hearing from within the administration was, the original sin was giving all these binders to the influencers to talk about the Epstein case.
You mean the nothing burger binders?
Right. They were all largely public information already. And they don't seem to have the ability to do a little introspection and think, maybe if we just didn't campaign on this so hard. And, they talk about basically this inertia and momentum that they have no real control over anymore.
Is there going to be a head that rolls from this administration as a result of this? If things don't calm down a little bit within the MAGA base, is there someone that's going to have to go as a sacrificial lamb? And if so, who would that be?
Yeah, so I think that person would be Pam Bondi, but I really but I couldn't get a commitment on that when I was calling around on it. I think that she's viewed as having maybe the weakest hand and the lowest level of political capital in all this.
But Trump loves her.
He does. And actually, a wrinkle that did not make it into my piece was I got in touch with Matt Gaetz, who very well could have been overseeing this whole thing, and he double made sure to tell me over the phone and over text that he doesn't have any time for this. I don't know if he actually does. He's hosting a Newsmax show and seems to have quite a bit of free time on his hands. But, you know, it really goes to show, like, this is the worst spot to be in. And if you look at someone like Deputy FBI Director Dan Bongino, he's been going dark. He has not tweeted from his main account for over a week. Clearly someone was leaking that he was considering quitting his job, and there was some sort of...
He took off a day of work, right?
Yeah.
Didn't show up.
So, yeah, I think Bondi of the three would be the most likely. But, you know, there's a lot of blame going around internally, too, at these younger aides who they thought were maybe a little overly enthusiastic about the whole earlier, you know, binder release with the conservative influencers. But I'm not really sure if actually finding a head to roll for this thing is going to help the situation when it comes to that acute problem of the base.
Okay. Jake LaHut, thank you so much. So I want to turn now to former SDNY Assistant U.S. Attorney and Westchester County DA Mimi Rocha. Mimi is an adjunct professor and senior executive editor of Bloomberg Opinion, and Molly Jong-Fast, special correspondent with Vanity Fair, author and host of the Fast Politics podcast, both of whom are MSNBC political analysts. We're grateful for that. Tim, MAGA's literally yelling about this, and you've written books about Trump. Are you surprised he's having such a tough time reining in this discontent?
I'm not surprised he's having a hard time reining it in, Alex, because when you animate a political movement through conspiracy theories, as Trump has done, and when you yourself have trafficked in conspiracy theories for decades, I mean, this is the same man who peddled birtherism around Barack Obama, helped foment the Benghazi conspiracy around Hillary Clinton, and of course, her deleted emails, et cetera, et cetera. And the same people who are turning on him now about the Epstein, quote unquote, files are the same people he surfed on top of when this was first put out there as a conspiracy. And so when you try to reap the whirlwind of conspiracy theories, they can turn back upon you. And what's happening now is there are these fissures within the MAGA movement around this particularly weird issue, as they are prone to embrace, and they're turning on one another. And conspiracy theories can't be put back in a bottle. Once you put them out there, often there's very little you can do to rein people in because they assume de facto that you're still hiding things, no matter how much you release. You know, it's a slippery slope with no bottom. And he's on that now. So the issue now is someone going to put, some braces beneath his feet to stop him from sliding, or is it going to be endless?
Let's have a quick sample here of MAGA supporters calling into conservative talk shows this week. Watch this.
We have a president who tells us to move on from Epstein because it doesn't matter. And yet he still talks about the 2020 election fraud. He talks about the Hunter Biden laptop.
What about justice for these young ladies who were trafficked? What about their justice?
These Epstein files, we were told that there was going to be released. And the fact that it's suddenly gone away and he's trying to gaslight us is like a punch in the gut to MAGA.
I'm concerned about being able to trust Donald Trump to keep his word.
Well, Molly, Trump is frantically tweeting, filing lawsuits, pushing to unseal transcripts, but reports are emerging detailing his frustration with the MAGA revolt and Pam Bondi's role in it. Is this mess beyond his control, at least for now?
Yeah, and I also think it's pretty interesting that we've seen Trump sort of, he really has been out of step with his base. I mean, you have to remember, these are people who have made huge sacrifices for Trump, right? They have sort of voted in spite of their best interests in a lot of ways, right? Like the rural healthcare stuff, the closing hospitals. This is going to affect them. they have had this kind of supernatural faith in Trump, in this belief that Trump was going to do something amazing. And that was because he was always promising it. He was making these sort of very pie in the sky promises. And this is something where he said, I'm going to, this conspiracy, he had really fed the flames of it for a long time, and so had other MAGAs. So the idea was that he was going to, sort of solve this tragedy in a way. And what we've seen is, instead of saying, sometimes there are, instead of like backing the base off quietly and saying, sometimes there aren't answers for things, he basically just sort of was like, why are you guys so upset about this? Which I think really compounded his problem. And now it's sort of like a freight train. I mean, what's so important about this story is that it's not us. It's not the sort of the mainstream media going like, oh, this is it. This is a bridge too far. It's his people. Yeah. It's the people for whom everything else has not been a deal breaker. Those people are the ones who are really affected by this. And I think that this is the first time, certainly in this second Trump administration or in the first, where we've really seen this schism in the base like this.
Yeah. Tim, speaking of the first, his former chief of staff, Mick Mulvaney, has said, yeah, Trump's in the files. There are a lot of people in the files. So when you have that kind of endorsement, and he also talks about the word list and how that is, used very loosely. ABC reports the FBI evidence, just want to run through it quickly. 40 computers.
Republicans are furious, guys. They're livid. And Trump knows he's messing up because he has no strategy. No strategy at all. And that's going to cost them seats. Trump, I guess, he doesn't really care about anybody but himself. But I think he must even have to realize that the Republican people that he views as his puppets, he needs their bums in seats to protect him and to pass his laws every now and then, right? I know he tries to do everything via executive order, but even Trump has to pass some law, like his big, beautiful bill atrocity. He needed Republicans to get that done. And he's in danger of losing a lot of them because the way he's approaching the list, is it real? It isn't. He's focusing more on suing fellow right-wing outlets than actually just listening to, one, his base, but two, like 95% of Americans, 93, whatever it is, well over 90% of Americans are unsatisfied with the info they're getting. Think about, guys, American politics and all the things you and I agree on, that billionaires don't deserve tax cuts to take away social programs. But there are some Americans that actually believe that that's a good thing, unfortunately. There's not a lot out there where you can get 93, 95% of Americans to agree on. Except that Donald is handling this poorly. And that is where about 95% of Americans agree. And look, a lot of people are MAGA there, and they're still going to vote. Like, they're gonna think Trump's doing bad here, and they'll still vote Republican come November 2026. But if only a few percent of them don't, and they vote Democrat, or the Republicans just don't show up out of disgust, then the Democrats will win. And Republicans are worried because the strategy they have is failing, and they're starting to blame Donald.